Welcome to Unrestrained, the podcast series from CPI. Here you can enjoy conversations where professionals on all sides of crisis and behavior management relax and open up about themselves, their workplace, and their clients. You'll get the latest tips and trends from the best in the business, so tune in often to integrate their experiences with your own. Hello and welcome to Unrestrained, the CPI podcast series. This is your host, Terry Vitone. Today my guest is Julie Hertzog, a nationally recognized leader on bullying prevention. Hello and welcome, Julie.
I'm happy to be on the show, Terry. Thank you.
You're welcome. Julie is the director of PACER'S National Bullying Prevention Center, which she helped create back in 2006, and where she has led the development of a variety of curriculum and resources, including creating content for PACERKidsAgainstBullying.org and PACERTeensAgainstBullying.org. A little later in the podcast, we'll go and get the exact addresses for people to find that. In 2012, Julie was appointed as a member and co-chair of Minnesota's governor's task force on the prevention of school bullying. She's been quoted by media throughout the U.S., including CNN, NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams, Time for Kids, The Huffington Post, and she's been on staff at PACER since 2000. Julie, to begin today, I think it would be great if you could talk about your son David and the way he personally inspired you to become a leading bullying prevention advocate.
Oh, well, thank you, Terry. I love being able to start with that question because in my role as director at our National Bullying Prevention Center, I think when we come to our careers, everybody kind of has a story of how they got there. And, as a young person growing up, I certainly never said to myself, someday I'm going to be the director of the National Bullying Prevention Center. But, it's amazing how life and situations impact what you do and what you become passionate about. And when my husband and I, we had a daughter back in 1995, and then we quickly followed up about a year later with another child in 1996, who was our son David. And David was born with Down syndrome, and he also had some very significant medical issues. And he was a little boy who was medically fragile. He had 3 open heart surgeries, had a pacemaker, a feeding tube, some other really significant things. He was on a ventilator. And so, he was a child who just fought incredibly hard to survive. And, it impacted our family a lot. And when David was entering into kindergarten, I was working for an organization. It's called PACER Center, which I'll get into a little bit as well. But when David was going into kindergarten, I was looking at him and thinking, here's a child who is incredibly vulnerable. He doesn't talk. He's small in stature, has some really obvious differences. And I thought to myself, wow, I can't bear the thought of anybody ever being cruel to David or teasing him because of those differences, especially knowing what a courageous little soul he is just in surviving and living. And so he really inspired my work around the topic of bullying, because I thought, if anybody deserves to be safe in our schools, it's my son. And it's all the other kids out there like him who have stories that are powerful. And so much of bullying is about differences and, about what makes kids truly unique. And I thought, I'm in a marvelous position to make a difference. And PACER Center is an advocacy organization for students with disabilities. And so, just having that background, I also have a background. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology, had worked extensively in the field of domestic abuse and child abuse, and thought I can apply all these lessons and really think about this topic of bullying, because in early 2000, people weren't talking about it very much. And so, David, since age 5, and he's now 18, so 13 years later, has really been inspirational in all the work that I do around bullying. But our efforts aren't just for kids with disabilities, they're for all kids, because kids are, again, bullied because of differences, whether it's their weight, whether it's their academic ability, whether it's their disability, whether they are perceived or identified as LGBT students. Kids get bullied. And so PACER Center, we've been at this work for a long time. But at my personal core as a mom, David is always at the forefront.
And at 18, may I ask, what are his interests today?
Well, at 18, so he's now a senior. One of the things, Terry, that I love to say at this point in time is that David is actually quite popular at his school, which is such a different experience than kids were had 10, 20, well, definitely 20 years ago. And he's nonverbal, and I think that that's such an amazing testimony to what we did a lot at his school was just always involving his peers and having honest conversations about his disability. And kids, his peers are amazing and how they reach out to him and connect with him and are comfortable doing that. But a lot of that, was very purposefully. It didn't happen just organically either. We implemented programs.
Then it has to be deeply gratifying for you personally, and also as a powerful example to other parents and other school systems and administrators who might want to create a safe place. That's a success story of note.
It is, and I think one of the things is when there's differences is that we want to be talking about those differences and and not putting them under the rug. We want to be sharing that it does harm somebody to tease them about their weight, whether they're underweight or overweight, and just bringing that to kids' awareness, because I find that kids are incredibly sensitive if you share, why it is that hurts somebody, because they don't always recognize it right away. They may kind of get it, but to be having those honest conversations is really important.
Well, that leads me to another question I had today. Well, you advocate empathy education as a component of effective bullying prevention initiatives, and getting those kids to empathize with other students. Where and how would schools interested in providing empathy education, how do they begin to find a way to do that?
Well, there's a lot of great programs out there, and you have to make it part of your daily curriculum. A lot of times I think when people look at this whole topic of bullying prevention, it started with, well, we'll have a one-day school assembly and we'll talk about bullying and it'll go away, but it's not that simple, because bullying has been around for a lot of years. And so when you talk about a change in culture, we talk at PACER about we're making a paradigm shift from bullying being this, quote unquote, accepted rite of childhood passage, or, some of those other statements that we have about it just being a natural part of growing up. You really have to start by saying, number one, this behavior is not accepted in our school, and giving the behavior a name too, so the kids understand exactly what bullying is. And then, from there, what we want to do is build schools that have a culture of just respect and empathy and understanding and inclusion. And you do that by, having special events. So there are conversations starting about maybe different populations of kids, or, especially and I'll go back to disability because that's what I'm most familiar with. When at our organization, when we talk about disability, it's not just a child like David who we're very aware has a disability, because you can see his differences, but it's also that child with Tourette's, or that child with a learning disability or ADHD, where their behavior is more reflective of their disability, but they're going to look a lot like, their typically able peers. And so, to be talking about what is ADHD, what is autism, what is Asperger's, I think that just builds that acceptance, because then kids can say, oh, now I get it. His behavior is part of who he is. And, and just having that acceptance, understanding really breeds acceptance, especially with kids.
That's a great lesson, and it leads into another question about verbalizing and defining these things. In your video, Bullies and Bystanders, What Experts Say, you say, quote, so much of bullying is about silence. That seems to relate to what you're speaking to now.
Yeah, I think again, just historically, Terry, as we look at this issue of bullying, there's a lot of talk about it now, and, a lot of awareness being raised. But why, one of the reasons that it's been perpetuated for years is that, again, if we look back at some of those statements that we have, like sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you, we've rationalized this behavior for so long. And we think about, those times when kids have come up and maybe told their parent or another adult, so-and-so is being picked on. What was the advice that we gave kids? It was to, mind your own business, or, that behavior is not that bad, or that's just kids being kids. So when kids hear that, they're much less likely to want to intervene or want to support that person because they're being sent that message that this is not something we talk about. This is just the way it is.
It's interesting you mentioned, because it comes to my mind that this whole, the expression that's been, current for maybe not so much anymore, but man up, is a way to say don't articulate what you're feeling, just sort of take it. And the residue of that kind of thinking is still in the society, it seems.
Absolutely. It's absolutely there. And I think, and again, that's been what I know my parents said that to me. There's still parents saying it, that, there's also the expression, oh, bullying will make you tougher. And what we want to do is help people understand that it doesn't make you tougher. It tears kids down. It tears them down not only short term, but also long term. There's longitudinal research out there now that shows how devastating the impact of bullying is well into adulthood. But kids who are bullied and are going through school right now are more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression. They also don't want to go to school. They simply don't want to go to school because you can imagine as an adult, we've all had those experiences in the workplace where that's a person who's just made our lives miserable. Well, imagine as a kid going to that every day and no one helping you. That's the impact. And if kids could stand up to that person bullying them, they would. They absolutely would. But bullying is about an imbalance of power. The kids who are doing the bullying are finding that vulnerable person who's not able to defend against the behavior. Another thing that we tell our kids too is, and again, this is, Terry, I say this because it's well-intentioned advice, and I don't want any parent who has ever said it to feel bad, but, a lot of times parents will say, oh, just ignore it. It'll go away. Well, you know what? If it was that simple, we simply wouldn't have a problem with bullying, but ignoring it won't make it go away. In fact, when kids try to ignore it, that's oftentimes when they find they become more and more a target of it because they're perceived as being even more vulnerable to them.
Mm-hmm. It's in Bullies and Bystanders, you also say, instead of having bullying be this accepted kind of behavior, or this behavior that we are tacit about and say, well, maybe if we ignore it or you ignore it, it will go away. You say, well, why don't we make kindness and tolerance and inclusion become the norm? How can educators and parents and people surrounding the bullying issue begin that transformation?
Well, I would strongly say that transformation has already begun, and there's so much more awareness about this topic, and most importantly about the impact, because that's why it really matters. Why are we talking about this? We're talking about it because it impacts kids in such negative ways. And it's an unhealthy behavior. And it also, it's setting the stage for some long-term behaviors. And so we really start to teach kids about the word, I'll use the word advocacy. And it's about, a lot of bullying can be prevented by, the bystander being supportive of the kid who's being bullied. And we talk about, that's what we call advocacy. It's about looking out for others. And self-advocacy is about being able to look out for yourself. And we always tell kids, you don't need to, if you're being bullied, it's not up to you to fix it. It's never up to you just solely to fix it. You need adults, you need your parents, you need support of school, but you can certainly have a role in it. And I think that's so important, say, for example, even with David, what we did with him for self-advocacy, even as a kid who was nonverbal, we taught him, if something doesn't feel right to you, if somebody's making you feel sad, you need to go and identify that to a teacher. And so, again, it's not about him fixing it, but it's about making sure that he's not silent about it, that he's not just feeling at a point where he needs to accept that behavior. He needs to know he has the right to be safe. he needs to know that he's not alone, and he needs to know he can develop a plan and a strategy to make sure that behavior doesn't continue.
Excellent. So now back, you guys, PACER founded October as National Bullying Prevention Month. Is that correct? Yes.
We did.
Can you talk about
way
that
back.
a little bit?
Yeah, way back in 2006. So it's coming on 10 years here already. We, as an organization, we're risk takers. We also like to push conversations forward, and we felt that the way that you can do that is to create an awareness-raising event. And so in 2006, we started as a week, and there was such tremendous interest in it and such tremendous support from people like National PTA, National Education Association, and other organizations, as well as just the community in general, wanted to have this topic, wanted to bring it to the schools. And so in 2010, we expanded it to be the month of October. And we purposefully chose October because it was early in the school year, so we wanted to make sure that the conversation was jump-started, so it continued throughout the year. And then we just continue to expand on opportunities and resources for schools to get involved. And so there's a couple great events. There's PACER, along with maybe about 50, maybe even more than that, organizations hold what's called run, walk, rolls against bullying throughout the country. And again, those are just family-friendly events to be talking about the topic, to let kids know that they're supported if it's happening to them. It's a way to make the conversation very public. And then we also have a wonderful event called Unity Day, which is Wednesday, October 22nd. And that day has a very simple call to action to wear the color orange or to display the color orange. And what that does is, again, just shows solidarity around this issue, that it's something we care about. And I would also add, Terry, that we, as an organization, we promote, we don't use negative words, where it's against the bully or anything. We always talk about bullying as a behavior, because a behavior can change. And so when we talk about Unity Day, what we're saying is we want to come together as a community and show that all kids need to be safe. All kids deserve to be safe. And that's really, the core message.
We share that message of inclusion at CPI. In fact, I continually have to sort of correct my language. Instead of saying anti-bullying, we want to say bullying prevention and those sorts of things. So we are totally working on crafting our message so that we talk about the behavior and never the child or young adult, as it may be, or an adult who's doing the bullying. Hopefully by that point it's not the adult, but we know that's not always true. Julie, could you tell us about the sites I mentioned in your introduction, maybe how people can get to them and what they might find there?
You can go visit PACER'S National Bullying Prevention Center, and the shorthand URL for that is PACER, PACER.org/bullying. You can also go into Google and you can search us, and we'll come up very high in the rankings, so you can find it that way as well. And that's our portal page that provides information to parents and professionals, and everything on there from the majority of our resources are free. They're set up to be implemented in the school. They're set up to provide parents information about how they can work with their school if their child is being bullied. And then also we have two outstanding websites that are audience specific. And we, as an organization, we really first started working with the kids themselves. And these websites were developed even before other websites were. But the first one is for elementary school students, and it's called KIDS. It's kidsagainstbullying.org. It can be found at PACER, kidsagainstbullying.org. You can also access it through our portal page at pacer.org/bullying. And the second one is for middle and high school students, and it's just a sibling site to the other one. It's PACER'S But those sites, Terry, are for kids because we find that kids are passionate about this issue. They want to get involved. They want to know what they can do. So there's great age-appropriate information about activities for them, what they can do in their community. Because we always say, we as adults are thinking a lot about this issue, but kids are thinking about it even more. They think about it in slightly different ways that we do. But we also say to kids, this is your issue, and you can also be the solution to it. And, they feel you put those tools in their hands, and they're just a very powerful influence on their peers. And we want to make sure they're having a positive influence on their peers.
That is a great message. That's a great takeaway. I appreciate it. Well, Julie, I want to thank you and congratulations on all the success you've had with your bullying prevention initiatives at PACER and at the National Bullying Prevention Center. I want to thank you for joining us today on Unrestrained. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to leave with? You are kicking off our month of difference makers, and we appreciate you doing that. Any last words of wisdom or advice for people out there who are looking to make a difference against bullying?
Yeah, I would just, a takeaway would be the end of bullying begins with you. We have that tagline since 2006, and it's really just about everybody has a role to play here, and everybody can do something about this issue. And, one of it is just recognizing that, a little kindness in anybody's day makes a huge difference, but especially to somebody who you can tell, has been hurt or harmed. It's so important to reach out to that individual and say, you're not alone. I think that's really important.
Excellent. Well, thank you. My guest today on Unrestrained has been Julie Hertzog. She's the director of PACER'S National Bullying Prevention Center. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you for joining us today on Unrestrained. Please tune in next week for a new episode featuring bullying prevention advocate and Weak Fish author Michael Dorn. Till then, this is your host, Terry Vitone, hoping your intention is prevention.